Just give you a little bit of background. Dale Fellows is a graduate of Mayfield High School and Lakewood Community College. He's belonged to a group from his friends. We made history. He has a passion for having a true history of our country, and he's convinced that the best way to share his knowledge of George Washington is through a reenactment. Nancy Fellows, who obviously is his wife, began portraying Martha once Dale started doing George. It was appropriate. And she is currently working on a series of new programs she hopes to begin presenting in 2026. They've been frequent visitors to Williamsburg and Washington, D.C., or Mount Vernon. And we are thrilled to have them have Dale and Nancy Fellows from here on known as President and Martha Washington. Mr. President?
Good citizens of our Northwest Territory, I am most pleased and honored to be with you this 9th day of November in the year of our Lord 1790 as the first President of the United States of America. I'm really thrilled to have Mrs. Washington, as we call her Lady Washington, to join me today. So thank you for that. That's a special treat for me. I must say I was most happy with my retirement from public life at our home at Mount Vernon with my family and two of our grandchildren. After serving in the Virginia House of Burgesses for some 16 years, serving in the Continental Congress, and then as commander of the Continental Army for 8 long years, life at Mount Vernon was most pleasant and peaceful. However, when Mr. Charles Thompson arrived upon my door, he's the former Continental Congress and Confederation Congress Secretary, when he arrived on that 14th day of April in 1789, he informed me that our new Congress had counted the electors' votes cast that February passed, and my name was the unanimous choice for president. I was most humbled and honored to be summoned by my country once again, whose voice I can never hear, but with veneration and love. I left 2 days later for the city of New York with the best disposition to render service to my country in obedience to its call, but with less hope of answering its expectations. Integrity and firmness is all I can promise. On the 30th day of April that year, Mr. Robert Livingston, Chancellor of the state of New York, administered the oath of office, to which I ended, so help me God. As you know, our journey to this place and time and station in the world has been long, arduous, and with great sacrifice by all. I dare say it has been our love of liberty and divine providence that has seen us through to now and will guide our future together as one nation. Certainly no people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand that conducts the affairs of men more than the people of these United States. You know, it does not seem that long ago I was most loyal to my British heritage and surveying parts of our country, some not too far from here, with my good friend George William Fairfax and others. Although it was 40 years ago and my reddish hair has succumbed to those years. Then came the war with the French, who were joined by some of the Indian tribes. Some of you here may have had family members serve in that war. As a young lieutenant colonel with the Virginia militia, I saw my first battles of war, and I shared with a friend that I heard the bullets whistle, and believe me, there is something charming in the sound. At the Battle of Monongahela, I had 4 bullets shot through my coat, 2 horses shot from under me, and yet escaped unhurt. With that war's end, after successfully driving the French from Fort Duquesne, I naively thought I had seen my last battle of war. I trust now, after the Great War, that I have seen my last. Our war for independence followed years of British tyranny and acts of despotism. With all the unjust taxes imposed upon us, I stated at the time that Parliament hath no more right to put their hands into my pocket without my consent than I have to put my hands into yours for money. We needed to defend our liberty, which we had derived from our ancestors, against those lordly masters in Great Britain. And in 1779, during the war, I made it clear that our cause is noble. It is the cause of mankind. We saw many a bloody battle, starting with those poor souls at Lexington and Concord, Fort Ticonderoga, Bunker Hill, Trenton and Princeton, Saratoga, Brandywine, Germantown, Monmouth, Yorktown, and others. We lived through many cold and harsh winters. Valley Forge and Morristown certainly come to mind, where our troops had to endure not only the bad weather, sickness, and disease, but not enough food, not enough shoes and stockings, their clothing worn so thin that they were barely held together, and their pay being insufficient for the service they were rendering and not occurring often enough. Yet when it came time to fight for our freedoms and liberties, we saw many heroes on those battlefields. Many survived. Some are now at home with their Creator. They were a patriotic band of brothers. As president, I will strive to keep us at peace with all, and to hold sacred our regard for public justice. I have sworn an oath as president to my fellow citizens and to God himself to uphold the laws of the land and the rights of the people, as enumerated in the Constitution and I say our Declaration of Independence. Our new Constitution, debated and adopted by the delegates of the Constitutional Convention just 3 short years ago in Philadelphia, was ratified in the summer of 1788, as you know. It gives us a self-government that protects the rights of the states and the rights of the people. Rights which will be formally established once our Bill of Rights is ratified by the states, of which I have every confidence. And although not perfect, it is the best Constitution that could be obtained at this epoch. And yet, we must remember what brought us to Philadelphia that hot summer of 1787. A need for a more perfect union, as Gouverneur Morris wrote in the preamble. A need to let prejudices, unreasonable jealousies, and local interests yield to reason and liberality, so as not to have fall that which we had given so much blood, treasure, and years raising. After several years of being governed by our Articles of Confederation, we needed a fair government with a strong Congress, an effective executive, and an impartial judiciary. I must admit that I wondered if our government at the time could secure Americans' life, liberty, and property. We were certainly at the brink of a precipice, and I feared heading towards some awful crisis. I believed we needed to look for divine providence once again, for as it is written in Psalm 33:12, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Once convened on that 25th day of May, the delegates selected myself as president of the Constitutional Convention, another honor of which I was without experience. I accepted only after asking their indulgence towards the involuntary errors that my inexperience might occasion. Presiding over the convention, I was thus privy to the opinions and compromises made for the establishment of this government we now have. And finally, after 4 long months of deliberations and debate, our work was done. 7 articles. As president of the convention, I was the first to sign. But then it required ratification of 9 of the individual states. In early 1788, prior to the final ratification, I wrote to the Marquis de Lafayette that I will only add as further opinion in the maturest of deliberations that there is no alternative, no intermediate resting place between the adoption of this and a recurrence of an unqualified state of anarchy with all its deplorable consequences. Now, I am also aware of those good men who oppose and even fear this Constitution, men like Mr. George Mason and Mr. Patrick Henry, both of whom I served with for many years in the Virginia House of Burgesses. Thus, it will be incumbent upon myself, the members of the new Congress, future presidents and future Congresses, to allay those concerns and fears, to protect the people against tyranny by its own government, and to promote their liberty and happiness. And it will be incumbent upon you, the good citizens, to keep this republic. As our Declaration of Independence so succinctly states, government are instituted by men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. I, as president, am devoted to that premise, as I was devoted to the cause of independence. I wrote to my brother Jack back in 1775, "It is my full intention to devote my life, liberty, and fortune in the cause we are engaged in, if need be." Our Constitution begins with the statement, "We, the people of the United States," to clearly state that the power of our government will always reside with the people. And in all our deliberations, we kept readily in our view that which appeared to us the greatest interest of every true American, the consolidation of our Union. As I shall take my present leave, I remind you all that liberty has been the basis of our journey to independence and self-government. And the four pillars of our new government are an indissoluble union of the states under one federal head, a sacred regard for public justice, the adoption of a proper peace establishment, and the prevalence of that pacific and friendly disposition among the people of our country. I know that your love of liberty, your respect for the laws, your habits of industry, and your practice of the moral and religious obligations are the strongest claims to the national and individual happiness. And happiness will be with everyone reaping the fruits of his labors, everyone enjoying his own acquisitions without torment and without danger, and everyone accepting and fulfilling their responsibility to their nation and to others. As I wrote to the Marquis de Lafayette just a few months past, I think I see a path as clear and direct as a ray of light. Nothing but harmony, industry, and frugality are necessary to make us a great and happy people. I also believe that wisdom, aided by experience, will bring our new government as close to perfection as any human institution ever approximated. And as I wrote in my Thanksgiving proclamation last October, it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly implore His protection and favor. My immediate future will be to continue my tour of each and every one of our states, not to be received with parades and ostentatious displays of opulence that I experienced on my way to New York. Rather, it is to see for myself the situation and disposition of the citizens of our great country, and most importantly, to help build a national character and a national unity. For this Ohio territory, I can foresee statehood someday. And for myself, a return to my beloved Mount Vernon, to Mrs. Washington and our family as citizen farmer George Washington. I remain your most dutiful and humble servant. Now, would you like to hear from Lady Washington? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, dear. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm so honored to be here with all of you. As I listened to my husband share information with you, I thought I would share a little bit of my experiences when I met him at the encampments during the American Revolution. I really wanted to go the first time, and he said, no, you should stay home and keep yourself busy, visit family, and do some traveling with your son Jack and his wife Nellie. So reluctantly, I did. And then he decided I should come. And he sent a message back to Mount Vernon for me to join him. Of course, I was gone for about a month. Finally, when I came back, his nephew Lund said, Mr. Washington wants you in Cambridge. So I started making the preparations. And I took quite a few family members with me because I wanted to reenact our life at Mount Vernon to wherever he was. And so we took off and headed toward Philadelphia first. And when I went through all the towns, they were all so happy to see me and as if I was someone important, even though I was just the wife of George Washington and now the commander. But when I got to Philadelphia, and I had never been north of Annapolis, so I didn't know what I was going to expect. And of course, it was November, so there was some snow, which I really hadn't seen. And we were graciously welcomed in Philadelphia and stayed there for about a week to regroup. And during that time, I met Elizabeth Gates, and her husband, Horatio, was with George. So I decided she should come with us as well. So eventually we ended up in Cambridge. It took a month from Williamsburg to Cambridge and was so well greeted. And people just really felt that I should have some sort of title. So that is when they began to call me Lady Washington instead of Mrs. Washington. My goal was to make Mr. Washington as comfortable and safe as I could. And so I took over his household, which was being run fairly well, but I felt that I made things a little more efficient and helped with the expenses. And then I was able to take on all the individuals. I was sort of his gatekeeper, I guess, that wanted to see him because everybody wanted to see the commander. And many times there were people that were really important that needed to spend time with him, but I really wanted to take away all those domestic duties away from him and the entertainment away from him so he could concentrate on all the military actions that he needed to develop. And so sometimes there were individuals that I just clearly distracted, and I would have some entertainment for them and some meals, and then they never got to see George. So that was okay. But what I found out was that the other officers' wives, Elizabeth Gates was with me, but also Katie Knox, or I'm sorry, Katie Green and Lucy Knox joined us as well. And there were other women, the other wives of officers that were there too, to have individuals that tried to make their environment more like home really helped with their morale and the duty that was in front of them. So that first encampment was the beginning of all the encampments that I went to every year with Mr. Washington, a total of 8. And some I stayed maybe 5 months, and some I maybe stayed 10 months with him. And of course, as we saw what the needs were for each encampment, during that time away, we would make socks and mittens and shirts and brings all kinds of supplies that the soldiers needed. As you heard Mr. Washington say, that a lot of their clothes were threadbare. And the Washingtons were always a very generous couple. And so in some aspects, we had some means to provide instead of asking for any means from the government that we could provide to individuals to help make their lives better for the arduous task was ahead of them to keep our freedom. So thank you very much.
So I'm happy to answer any queries or curiosities you may have of myself or Lady Washington. Yes, sir.
Elijah Wolcott
First keeper of Bravo
Right.
was 14 years old when he came under your command. Were there a lot of other 14-year-olds, and were there any girls?
Yes and yes. So yes, we had a lot of our young people who joined, some of them with their family members as well. And of course, we had a lot of ladies and younger ladies who would help to those poor souls that may have gotten wounded or that on the battlefield. I demanded too at the time that Congress pay those people to do that. And I understand that that might actually spur a whole type of occupation called nursing, and that, but they were invaluable to our cause. But yes, now normally we would try and keep the younger ones to be the fife and drummers, things like that, and try and stay out of harm's way. But sometimes it became necessary, and sometimes some of them were a very good shot too. And so, but yes, we did. Sir.
I know this question may embarrass you and perhaps even burden you somewhat, but I'm compelled to ask it. Did you really cut down the cherry?
No. Now I can elaborate on that. I understand. I've heard this story of me before, but I understand it was written by somebody who felt I needed more to be lifted up even more, and I'm lifted up just fine. But the cherry tree story, although not necessarily factually correct, it was very true that I was an honest man, and I demanded honesty amongst my colleagues and my friends. That is one thing that is uncompromising for me. And so my father, though, but he died when I was about 11 years old. And so the historical part of that age and that did not actually occur. But again, I look at it like a nice parable. Any other queries or curiosities of us? Yes, sir.
Did you have slaves on Mount Vernon?
We did. Yes. Yes. Between Mrs. Washington and I, of course, Mrs. Washington, when I married the widow Custis, and brought her estate under together with mine. Mine was much smaller. So I understand there's a term that might be used later on, of marrying up, and I certainly did. But yes, we did. But and some people have asked me about that very issue, and of course we debated that a lot in the Constitution. That was one of the main things that we had to debate about. And as I've said before, there is no man living who more sincerely wishes for a plan to be adopted for the abolition of it, because it is a scourge that we've inherited from our ancestors and one that needs to be done away with. Ma'am.
I've heard one time where we had something to do with the fact that the bourbon industry moved from the east to Kentucky. Is that true in any way?
Well, I was the one that had the largest cider press in the country, so I wouldn't want to move it anywhere, actually. Although I did, in fact, have property in Kentucky, and so being able to produce some there too was the value to me later in my life. Yeah. So as I'm thinking ahead, I might want to do that later on. But yeah, and my story about how I acquired land, and of course I always believed that land was wealth. We were not born wealthy or in that class at all. We were not poor, but we were certainly not of that ilk. My brother Lawrence, half-brother Lawrence, who was 14 years my elder, married into the Fairfax family and gave me an introduction into that society, that high society of the Fairfax family. And I aspired to that. And that's kind of what drove me after my father died, and I needed a profession, and I needed to do what I wanted and what I needed to do in life. And I realized really quickly that land was wealth. So I set out at a very young age to acquire as much land as I could. By the age of 18, I had 1,500 of my own acres of property, and I now own over 250,000 acres of property in several different states. Kentucky is one. The only close second to land in my life, as far as importance, were horses. I love horses. I love racing horses, and Magnolia was one of my greatest racehorses, Brown Arabian. But to show you how much I like land even more, I traded Magnolia to my good friend Light Horse Harry Lee for 5,000 acres of property in Kentucky. Yes, ma'am.
How did you meet Mrs. Custis? Had you known her a long time, or did you meet?
You obviously.
Not like before you married, whatever.
Thank you for the question. So she wants to know how Mr. Washington and I met. Actually, Mr. Washington and I knew each other probably most of our lives. We came from similar backgrounds. We were not of higher gentry. We were more of a middle class. We were at church gatherings and events that families would have. So we had known each other for a long time. But I ended up marrying Daniel Park Custis, and we had 4 children, 2 of which died pretty much after birth. And then after we were married several years, my oldest toddler was sick, and my husband got sick, and Daniel Park Custis died. So now I was a widow with 2 children. And I was well sought after because now I was of a higher status because of the Custis family and Daniel's father, who owned a lot of plantations. And so I was probably a good catch for a lot of young gentlemen. But I was at some friend's house, and they decided to invite Mr. Washington because they knew he was going to be in the area. And so he joined us, and we ended up talking most of the night, and then just started having more conversations and visiting with each other. And within several months, we decided to marry.
And it's correct that the 2 of you had no children, but he raised your children as his. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. George and I have no children, but we did raise my 2 children, Patsy and Jackie. Patsy died in her teens with an epileptic attack, and then Jackie went to the war right at the end and ended up with camp fever, and he passed away. He and Nellie had 4 children. Nellie took the 2 olders, and we kept the 2 youngers and raised our 2 grandchildren as our own.
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of crops did you grow?
Sure. What kind of crops did I grow? So for a long time, early on, it was tobacco. But when we started to have issues with Great Britain, the Stamp Act and others, myself and my neighbor, George Mason, proposed to the House of Burgesses, which we were both members of, as I mentioned, a non-importation approach to things. And that's when I personally started to become self-sufficient at Mount Vernon. So then we started to grow wheat and corn and barley and all those types of things. But we also started to rigorously do other things. We have large fruit orchards. That's where we make our wine, and of course then we also have the cider press, as I mentioned. But we did commercial fishing. I bred hounds, bred horses, and we have our own sawmill, our own grist mill, our own clothing factory. So we set out, and that's where we are at now, in doing all those types of things to make us very self-sufficient and not dependent upon Great Britain. And of course, from a planter's point of view, tobacco is tough on your land. It is tough. It's hard to grow it every single year in the same soil. Sir.
Sitting next to me is the mayor of the historic village of Marblehead. Can George Washington give him some good advice?
Well, I'm wondering when I heard the term Marblehead, is it named after the Marbleheader boys that helped us cross the Delaware?
It's named after Marblehead, Massachusetts.
Okay, and that's probably the area that they were from.
They came here during after the war. This was part of the firelands.
Very nice.
They reminded them of home with all the rocky cliffs.
Very nice. Very nice. So, yeah, I mean, they were extremely important for us to get across the Delaware, and that's a whole nother story that we could talk about. But my advice is to always be honest, be transparent, and try to block out the negative noise. How's that? I think I'll probably have a hard time doing that in my next, if I do another term, which I do not want to do, by the way. Yes, ma'am.
Well, my question was kind of similar to what they just asked, was your leadership in the military versus potential leadership skills in the political arena are probably going to be a little different. So what will you be doing different?
So it is different, but it is all about relationships that you have and how do you deal with different personalities. Certainly in our Virginia House of Burgesses, that I was in for 16 years, we had a lot of differences of opinion, especially when you have a Mr. Patrick Henry as part of your entourage there. And so Mr. Henry and I were usually on the same page on many things, but he was certainly much more the orator than I. My leadership, of course, was more about perseverance and setting goals and getting to where we needed to be, whatever long and arduous it was going to take. We certainly didn't think that the Great War was going to take us 8 years, but it did. Of course, many people think that war ended at Yorktown, and it didn't. It was 2 more years before we actually had a peace treaty. But now, in the political arena, now it's talking to and dealing with all those different people from different parts of the country with their own prejudices and local interests, as I mentioned. And now we need to work in a united front. It's why those Articles of Confederation didn't work. Articles of Confederation got us through the war, but post-war, what did it do? It created 13 individual countries instead of 13 United States. They were all battling against each other. They were tariffing each other. They were imposing taxes on each other. And it was all about local interests. My goal is to unite this country, as I mentioned in my talk. That's why I'm going to each and every one of our states to make sure that I understand the character and dispositions of the people in those particular states and make sure that we can unite and build a national character. And that's what my goal is. Sir.
Were you actually able to visit each state?
Yes, I was. Each and every one of our states. Of course, do you know how many states we had when I was inaugurated on that 30th day of April, 1789? Anybody have an idea?
13.
11, correct. Correct. We only had 11 that had ratified at that point. Now, who said that? Who said 11? Okay. Do you know which ones were not?
Connecticut, Rhode Island,
New England.
One, you had one right. What was the other one?
New England.
Vermont.
Well, New England was a territory. So it was Rhode Island and one of the southern states.
South Carolina.
Close.
North Carolina.
North Carolina. There you go. Okay, those are one of those things. I'll make up a word called trivia. You can use that for a trivia contest. So North Carolina had voted against ratification, and then once I took the presidency, then they voted for ratification. Of course, their protest was about not having a Bill of Rights. Rhode Island never even came to the convention. They felt that the Articles of Confederation should have been modified and amended and not a new form of government created. So, but they just recently, at the end of May of 1790, did join us. So now there's 13. Sir.
What was the underlying cause of Benedict Arnold?
The traitor?
Yes.
Oh, I will never talk about the traitor other than to find him and hang him. Sir.
So did you ever meet with General Cornwallis, and if you did, what was that like?
I only not for a very long period of time, but certainly we met at the conclusion of not of the surrender. I was just mentioning this. Somebody mentioned Lincoln, and I said, yeah, Benjamin Lincoln, my second, who was the one that accepted the surrender story, because Cornwallis feigned sickness after the Yorktown defeat for them. And so I refused to accept the sword. And so Benjamin Lincoln, my second, accepted the sword. But after that became the treaty, what was the negotiation of the terms of the surrender. And so it was cordial at best. That's about all I can say. The one interesting thing was the Marquis de Lafayette had been successful in recruiting one of the slaves from the estate in one of the estates in Yorktown, and to have that person be a spy for us. Now, I usually don't talk about those things, but it's now some years past. And James Amistad was his name. Well, Cornwallis thought he was a spy for him, and he was actually a spy for Lafayette. And I had made sure that James Amistad was there to greet Cornwallis when we finalized the terms, and he called him some kind of a scallywag or something like that. So that was entertaining. Now, James Amistad went on to get his freedom because of the Marquis was so adamant when he came back in 1784, that he needed to be freed for what he did, and we did. And he changed his name to James Amistad Lafayette. Yes, sir.
Could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with the Polish engineer Tadeusz Kościuszko?
Oh, Thaddeus Kościuszko, yes. He was a wonderful engineer. His other compatriot from Poland, Casimir Pulaski, seems to get more attention, but Thaddeus Kościuszko was a wonderful engineer and helped us immensely at Saratoga with the fortifications and things like that. So he did himself great service to us, and I hope that someday, maybe even in this area, this Northwest Territory, this northern part of Northwest Territory, may even honor him. Yeah, I could just even see maybe a memorial to him somewhere in that area. Maybe I know there's. I'm going to send Moses Cleveland to start some new town up in northeast Ohio up here, and maybe that would be a good place to honor Thaddeus Kościuszko. How's that? So. And of course, we had a lot of folks from different countries and different areas that came and helped us. I mentioned the two from Poland. Of course, we had the Baron von Steuben from Prussia, and we had and a lot of the Hessians that we ended up defeating on that day after Christmas at Trenton. Many of them and others that came here just as mercenaries to being paid by the British to fight. Many of them ended up seeing what they liked and stayed. Ma'am.
So you are the symbol of saying, we will not have a king. That's your mark, one of your big marks in history. So were you was the Enlightenment part of your thinking? How did the writing of the Constitution take on no king?
Well, the writing of it, the person you'd want to talk to, of course, would be James Madison. So James Madison was, of course, and I think he'll be called the father of our Constitution. Now, what did Madison do? What did Jefferson do in Declaration. What did of course, Jefferson was not here during the Constitutional Convention. He was in France. But Madison and others who were very well learned. I, of course, was very self-aware that I was not the smartest person in the world academically, because my father died when I was about 11, as I said, and my formal education ceased at that point. All that I learned was practical experience and what I read in books. But Mr. Madison was well educated at Princeton and other places, and he was very well read. And what they did was, especially him, was studied all the different types of forms of government and forms of governorship, governance, if you will, in the ancients and all the way up to contemporary times, and formed this republic. And that they were very adamant. We are a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy, as I've heard people use that term, because what is democracy? It's mob rule. It's just whim at the time. If 50% plus one agree to something at this particular day, it becomes a law. Next week, it could be changed 180 degrees. So that's why you want a constitutional republic, to actually protect, as I mentioned in my talk, to protect the rights of the people, those inalienable rights that we all should have. And so those people, and we fought for the compromises, of course, that happened in the Constitutional Convention, as we talked about. What type of legislature will we have? We ended up with a bicameral legislature. What type of executive? Of course, in the Articles of Confederation, there was no executive. Because of that, we fought a war against the king. We didn't want that type of monarchy anymore, right? It wasn't by blood. That was probably the more accurate thing. Was no monarchy. Yeah, no leading the country by just by birth, but by deeds.
Except for Mr. Adams.
Except for Mr. Adams, she said.
Mr. Adams wanted his title to
My
be
title, yeah.
King or His Majesty, and
Yeah, it was some very elaborate term, but that's when I said, after he went through all these dissertations of how they were going to address me as president, I said, no, it's just Mr. President. That was it. So the Constitution is written, and it's able to be amended. And that's for good reason, just in case times change, things change historically and futuristically. But we also made it hard to amend, so it couldn't just be amended again on a whim at the particular time. And so I hope that answers your query. But yeah, there's no way that we want to be a king. It's the person that I aspire to be like. If there is a war hero that I look up to, is Cincinnatus, the great Roman soldier, who did his deeds, fought his battles, won his battles, and then went home to his plow. And that's what I intend to do. Sir.
If this is 1790, I want to talk a little bit about the future. Many years after that, this area, the Northwest Territory and Detroit, and it was very important in another war that we had with the British. What about during the Revolutionary War? Was this area important during the Revolutionary War? And if so, in what way?
So what it was important as, it was, of course, this area was all part of Virginia originally, right? And then it became parts of this area. I'm not sure if it came this far or not. You can tell me that. Was part of the Connecticut Western Reserve. What was important at that time was just whether or not we needed to fight any battles this far out. So the only fort we had was Fort Lawrence, which is in southeast Ohio, that southeast territory. But I would envision that multiple states will come out of this territory, this great territory. And I would hope that that will happen. Of course, when we created this, here's the interesting irony. As I mentioned, the Articles of Confederation and the Confederation Congress was very, very wieldy, right? You had to have all 13 states agree to anything. made it very tough to govern, right? So, but there was one thing, ironically, one of the greatest accomplishments, I believe, of the Confederation Congress, ironically occurred during the same time we were deliberating in Philadelphia on the Constitutional Convention. And it was the creation of the Northwest Ordinance. And in that, somebody mentioned slavery. In that, thanks to Manasseh Cutler, a great hero, I believe, for humanity, was able to convince people, he was a pastor from Connecticut area, to put an anti-slavery, no slavery in the Northwest Territory in that ordinance. And that's a great thing. Hope that answers your query. Sir.
You're concerned that our young children today won't enjoy history as much as the rest of us?
Yeah, I love to see more and more of our young people enjoy history, and because I'm not sure who might say this futuristically, but those who forget the ills of the past are condemned to repeat them. I heard that somewhere. I don't know where. Any other queries? Yes, ma'am.
What are some of your favorite founding fathers?
Martha Washington. Somebody asked me what was my greatest achievement, and without hesitation, I said marrying Martha Washington. But certainly, there's a lot of great people in my era. I mentioned Patrick Henry, obviously John Adams, Samuel Adams. You had, and there's some unsung ones too that I mentioned Manasseh Cutler, and you have some of those, Thomas Jefferson, of course, James Madison, Dr. Franklin, of course. My gosh, Dr. Franklin was an amazing man. And although he didn't speak very much at the Constitutional Convention because he was elderly and he was not of great health, when he did speak, everybody stopped and listened. And that's when we were engaged in a lot of debates about all the different parts of the Constitution, and to the point where it didn't even look like we were going to end up with anything. And Dr. Franklin stood up at that and said, we all must reflect, and myself included, he said, that maybe I don't always have the right answer to everything. And yet he said something to that effect. And that made everyone sit back and listen about their own infallibility, and that maybe they aren't the geniuses that they all thought they were. And maybe this is a good idea where we're going, and good compromises. Of course, he's also the one when we left that hall that day, and when we had a new form of government, and was asked, what form of government have you given us? And he said, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. Any other queries or curiosities? If not, I'm more. Oh, one more.
Just one last question. On your birthday, I understand many people come to visit you, but I heard that your favorite dessert is gingerbread. Is that true? Is it cherry pie or is it something different?
Actually, my favorite is ice cream. It is. Yeah. Yeah, it's ice cream. So, there's a lot of things that I enjoy food-wise, as Mrs. Washington will tell you. But it brings up an interesting point. How many people know the day I was born? The date I was born.
It's not the 22nd. Different calendar.
There you go.
12th?
She said it. So just so you know, I was born on the 11th day of February, 1732, under the Julian calendar. In the Gregorian calendar, everything moved 11 days. That was established in 1753, if I remember right. And so that's when my birthday became the 22nd day of February. Another one of those trivia contests. Well, we are just, oh, yes, ma'am.
This is a trick question, but since you are at the end here, if people were to write books about you in the future, which ones would you recommend?
The ones that are honest and truthful. I was saying. Well, that's a good place to stop. So we're going to go out of character. Thanks. So we're thrilled to be here. So I'm actually not George Washington, although it's not a bad person to be if you're going to be him. Nancy. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Nancy Fellows. I'm Dale's wife, and so many years ago, Dale would ask members of We Made History up in Lake County to perform for organizations such as the Rotary. And they started talking to him about, we need some other reenactors, and who would you like to be? And he said, well, I always liked George Washington. So he took that on, and Dale and I go to Williamsburg a lot. And he actually hooked up with Ron Carnegie, who plays the elder George Washington in Colonial Williamsburg today. And he sat down with Dale for a good hour and provided references to Dale to read that he felt were the most accurate to depict who George Washington was. Because there's a lot of things. And there's the whole cherry thing and wooden teeth, which he didn't have, and wearing a wig, which he didn't have. So there's just a lot of things about Mr. Washington that are fables and aren't true. But he really, with the help of Ron Carnegie, and then his research and his reading, plus he was invited to go to George Washington's library, which is across the street from Mount Vernon, which you can't get into unless you have an invitation. And there's a plethora of resources in there as well. So for years, I just was Dale's arm candy, got the costume. And so, of course, over the years, I've learned more and more about Martha Washington. And there's not a lot written about her because not a lot of information was saved. In fact, when George passed away, she burnt all their letters. There were only a couple that were from nieces that they had that Martha had written to them. Unlike Abigail Adams and John that saved everything. So we have a lot of history about them. The lady that plays Washington, Catherine, I forget Catherine's last name, but she just constantly does research and just tries to find any little piece of literature or a poem or a book or a writing or a letter that might have Martha's name in it and start to find out, what more from this can I find out about Martha Washington to share? Because as the wife of the first president of the United States, there's so much history that we should preserve, even going forth with our other presidents. And it wasn't until Dolly Madison when she became known as the first lady instead of Lady Washington. And we still have that today, which is really great. But so there's not a lot about Martha. It's kind of hard to find.
So I'll tell you about the books. So Douglas Southall Freeman wrote probably the most comprehensive writings about Washington that are extremely accurate, but it's a lot. It's almost 4,000 pages. It's a series of eight things. He actually passed away trying to finish up the last one, but he had enough people working with him. He was a former editor of one of the major newspapers in Richmond, Virginia, and so they were able to complete it. I've read the abridged version, which is 900 and some pages. But that's a good one. His Excellency by Joseph Ellis is another good one. And if you want something about Ohio history, how many of you have read Pioneers by David McCullough? That's a really good one. And it mentions, I was favorably excited when I read that he mentioned Manasseh Cutler, who I talked about, because Manasseh Cutler brought his family to this territory after the Northwest Ordinance was passed. So he's one of the pioneers, he and his family. So those are a couple good. There's a lot of other ones. There's a lot, but those are two good ones to start with. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you're looking for other historians too for your meetings, Debbie Weinkammer up in Lake County plays Lucretia Garfield, and she's excellent. The Garfield Trail is up in that area, and Tim Garfield is the great-great-grandson of President Garfield. So we have a lot going on about the Garfields in our area. The other one is John and Miriam from Ashtabula. They do the Lincolns. So I know there's other individuals that do Lincolns, but they're part of our group if you would want them to come and visit as well.
All right, great. Anything else? I know I've kept you guys a long time, but
Sorry.
very, very glad to be here. There's a whole lot of other myths and things I can tell you about George and Martha, but feel free to ask us before we leave. So thank you again. You're very hospitable. Appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you.